Hi, and welcome to Microsoft Excel Basics. In this course, I'm just going to teach you the fundamentals of using Excel, and this is just going to be a really gentle introduction. So if you're brand new to Excel, or if you feel a little bit overwhelmed by all the functions and features of Excel, don't worry about it. I'm going to make this really simple. And by the end of this course, you'll be able to use this function bar. You'll be able to navigate around the cells. You'll be able to do a bunch of formatting here. And you'll actually be able to build your own spreadsheet that looks just like this. And I'm going to walk you through this. And this is just a spreadsheet for if you were going to remodel your kitchen and wanted to calculate your costs. So I'm going to show you how to do all this formatting, and I'm going to show you how we set this up with formulas so that when you take your quantity and your cost, it multiplies it and gives you a total, and then how it adds all the way down the column to give you a grand total at the bottom. So this is a simple but effective spreadsheet, and it will give you a lot of the skills you need to kind of get started into Excel and start feeling a little better about it. In the next lectures, I'm going to show you a number of different techniques for using Excel, and then once you're feeling comfortable with those, we'll go ahead and we'll create this spreadsheet in the following section. Now in the next lecture, I'm going to give you a little overview of how to get set up and started in Excel. But really quick before we do that, I just want to show you some of the possibilities of the power of Excel. And I'm here this is just a basic Excel page. I've just opened up Excel. I haven't done anything to it yet. But I want to show you this. If you go click on File and New, you can go create a blank workbook, which is what we were just on. And that's just starting from scratch. And I'm going to show you some things to do to start from scratch. But you can also save yourself a lot of time if you really just want to dive in and get started, and you can use any of these office.com templates, and there are a ton of these, and it just depends on what you want to use it for. But let's say you need to use Excel for your work. You can go to this business folder, and it's going to bring up dozens of pre-formatted templates that you can click on, download, and use immediately. So let's say, for instance, that you are an administrative assistant and you need to create a telephone list. Right here you have organizational telephone list. So you click on that and you click download, and it brings up a pre-formatted Excel spreadsheet where you just go and you type in the fields. You can put their last name, their first name, spouse's name, address, home number, work number, cell number, and email, and it takes care of all of it for you. And going back into this business folder, let me show you a couple of other ones. You can do an invoice. So if you're going to send this out to a business that needed to pay you, you can do a packing slip, sales receipts, purchase orders, inventory lists, payroll calculators, and the list goes on and on and on. There are almost endless opportunities. So if you go into finance and accounting, you'll find things like ledgers, expense reports, loan calculators, vehicle service records, basically anything that you want to use to organize your business or anything that your employer needs from you. Many of those things you'll be able to find right here and get started right away. And then as you develop your skills with Excel, you can take any one of these templates and you can go in and you can customize it. So if you need to change any of these line items, you can change that, or you can add additional calculations in other columns if you need more information, and you can manipulate these to suit you better, and you'll be well on your way to drastically increasing your productivity. So that's just a quick introduction to those templates, because those can really save you a lot of time. But in the next lecture, we're going to dive right into the very basics. We're going to start with a blank spreadsheet, and I'm just going to show you really how to get started from scratch. So here we are with our blank document, and the very first thing I'm going to show you is how to save this document. So the first thing I recommend is going to your desktop and creating a new folder. because you need to have somewhere to save these. If you prefer, you can go down to your file manager in the left-hand corner and you can create a new folder there, for instance in your document panel. But for the purposes of making it super simple for you, I'm just going to show you. If you right click on the screen and you go to new, and this might be a little different depending on the computer or operating system you have, but you go to folder and that creates a new folder, and then I'm just going to call this Excel examples. Click enter and there's your folder right there, ready to save your work into. So now you can go back to your Excel spreadsheet and you can say go to file and save as, and now it's going to ask you where you want to save it. I'm going to navigate in this left column to my desktop, and there's my folder, Excel examples. So I'm going to click on that. It shows that that's empty, and it automatically names it book 1, but I don't want it to be called book 1. I want it to be called kitchen remodel costs, because that's what we're going to eventually create. And then I'm going to save that, and now this is, you can see now it's titled kitchen remodel costs. So whenever I click save, the little save icon up here, it's going to save this as kitchen remodel costs, and I don't have to worry about accidentally closing it without saving my work or anything like that. But before we get into creating an actual kitchen remodeling cost worksheet, I'm just going to show you some very basic functions and techniques that you can use, that you'll be able to use in almost any spreadsheet that you decide to create. So first, let's talk about entering data into your worksheet. It's pretty simple. Basically, you just click on a cell, it will highlight it. And when it's highlighted by that black box, you can just type in whatever you want to type in. So let's say here we're going to type in cabinets. And then when you're finished typing, you can click enter, or you can click on the little check mark here. Now, a couple of cool little tricks. If you want to go to the next cell, you click the tab button and it jumps right over there. And then now we're going to put in some numbers. Let's just put in the number 1000. And then let's go to the next cell, and we want to put in a number there. Let's put in 200. And then you can click, if you click enter, it'll drop you down to the next line. And anytime you hit enter, it'll drop you down one line. One quick little tip: if you want to copy this information a number of times, you can grab the corner of the box. See how my little cursor turns to a plus, and you can drag it down like this, and it will automatically copy all of that information down like that. That's the simple way to enter data into cells. In the next section, we're going to look at how to select cells and move around through the page a little more easily. So in this lecture, we're talking about how to select cells. So there are a couple of easy ways to do it. Obviously, first, if you click on a cell, it will select it. Another way to easily select a number of cells is to click in the middle of the cell, and you can either drag it to the right, or you can drag it downward, or you can drag it diagonally and highlight as many cells as you want. So I can highlight this entire area here, and then I'm working with that area. Now if you left click again anywhere on the page, it will get rid of what you've highlighted. So it'll just put you into one cell again. You can also use the shift and arrow keys. So if I press shift and right arrow, it will highlight along the row, and if I continue to hold down the shift and push the down arrow, it will go down the row. And if I push the left arrow, it'll come back in. So that's another quick way to select whatever cells that you want to select. In the next lecture, I'll show you how to use a couple of simple formulas to do mathematical calculations, which is where you'll really start to see the power and the magic of Excel make your life more efficient. So in this lecture, I'm going to teach you how to do a couple of simple formulas that will help you to add or multiply a bunch of numbers. So let's go back up to where we've been working. So I'm going to go ahead and clear all of this information, and I'm going to start with a simple list of numbers. So I'm just going to go clear contents. I'm going to start right back up in the corner here, and I'm just going to type in some very simple numbers and then hit the enter key. And these are just random numbers. These could be dollar amounts or quantities, anything really. But I'm just going to show you how to add these and multiply them really simply. So if you want to add this whole column, you can simply go to the auto sum button here, click that, and it is going to plug in this formula, and it's going to highlight all of these cells up here. It's guessing at what we want to add, and it's guessing correctly in this case because we want to add all 6 of these. And if you like what it says, all you have to do is push enter, and as you can see, it's automatically done the math. It's added all of these numbers up and put the total into this box. Now let's say we wanted to create that formula manually. What I could do, first I'm going to copy these cells over, and the way you do that is you click and drag and then right click and say copy, or you can say Control C for copy. So I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to say Control V for paste. So that puts all that new data right in there. Now when I go down to this column, and I'm going to put in a formula manually. Whenever you start a formula, you start with the equal sign, and then in this case we're going to do the sum, which is adding. And you notice as I start to type, it's going to give me a list of suggestions down here, and these are just different formulas. You don't need to worry about them right now, but these are just suggested formulas that you could use. And in this case, again, I just want to use the sum formula, which is adding, and then you start with a parentheses, and then you can click on the cells that you want to add. So if I just click on the first cell, notice how it says D1. And what that's referring to is column D right here and row 1. So that cell is called D1. Now if I just wanted that one, then I could just hit the enter key and that would be great. But I want all of these, so I can actually click in the center of that and drag down, and notice how it put a semicolon there. And so now it says D1 semicolon D6. So that's adding D1 all the way through D6. They're all highlighted and they're all included in the formula. Now when I hit enter, it completes the formula, and as you can see, it automatically adds a bracket at the end. And if I click on this cell again, you can see the formula is right up here, equals sum D1 through D6, and then it comes out the same, 22. So that's how to do the sum. Now let's say we wanted to multiply a couple of numbers. I'm going to start one more column here. We'll just do it really simply here. So we want to do 5 times 6. So you just go to here, you click your equal sign, and you just type in the cells that you want to multiply. Or you can even click on them. F1, and then a star, an asterisk, and then F2. And if I hit enter, you'll see 5 times 6 is 30. And you can see our formula up in the formula bar here, and the results of our formula right there. So those are 2 simple formulas, and in the next section I'm going to show you how we're going to use those formulas in a spreadsheet for our kitchen remodeling costs to calculate our costs really simply without having to do all the math every time. Alright, now is where things start to get interesting. So what we're going to do in this section is we're going to recreate this kitchen remodel cost worksheet. So the first thing you would do is go to File and New and double click on Blank Workbook. And that's going to create a blank spreadsheet for you that we can then recreate our kitchen remodel costs worksheet. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to save this as. So we're going to go to File, Save As, and we go to the desktop, and then I created that folder called Excel Examples. So I just click on the folder, and I'll rename this kitchen remodel costs and click Save. And now you can see it's changed to kitchen remodel costs up here. And now whenever we click Save, that'll just continue to save it into that folder as that file, and we won't have to worry about accidentally closing it after we're done and forgetting to save it. So the first thing we're going to do is create that heading. So you click in the middle of this cell and drag it across to highlight the top 4 cells. And then you go up to here and you click Merge and Center. And that combines all of those cells, so we just have one big cell for our heading. And then if you double click in there, it puts the cursor in there. And then you just type in kitchen remodel costs and double click it again. Click out of the cell and then click back to the cell. That'll highlight the entire cell. And then it's already centered because it automatically did that. But we're going to change some things about this. We're going to make it bold. And we're going to make it, let's do it 22 point font. And you'll notice that it is too big to fit now. But what you can do is grab this and drag it, and that will give you some more space. So now it fits in there just fine, and then we'll go in and add the color to it too. So this is your text color and this is your background color. You can highlight that and then just go pick the color that you want. And there it is. Now the last thing we'll do is expand these columns a little bit so that we have plenty of room to put in our different line items, and we'll get right to that in the next lecture. In this lecture we're going to put in our subheadings for each of our category lists. So first we're going to put materials here, then quantity, costs, and total. Now obviously these aren't formatted yet. The first thing we're going to do is expand this row a little bit just by clicking on the line and dragging. And then we're going to highlight this and drag across so we highlight all 4 of them. And then we can go ahead and format these. So first I'm going to center all of them. I'm going to make them bold, and I'm going to increase the font size a bit. And then I'm going to add a nice lighter color to those for a little bit of subtle contrast. And if I click off of that, you can see what we've got there. And now I can start putting in all of the details. So the first thing we have is cabinet handles, and we're going to have to make a little extra room over here so I can fit all of it in here. And then I'll go ahead and fill these out really quickly. Okay, so I've filled out all of the units in the materials list. Now notice that they're not in alphabetical order. One of the many awesome things about Excel is that I can highlight this entire list, go up here and say sort and filter, and sort A to Z. Now it's telling me that there's data in the next section, but we don't want to do that, so we just want to continue with the current selection and click sort. And you notice that it's now in perfect alphabetical order. And we don't really have to do a lot more formatting on that, but I'll show you just a couple of options that you would have. Is you could center that, and that will center everything. Or if you wanted to indent it a little bit, you can indent everything. Okay, now we're going to start entering our quantities in. So we just highlight the first cell, type in the number, hit enter. It magically drops down to the next row. Put in our quantity and hit enter. And I'll just go ahead and do these super quick. Okay, so there are all my quantities, and now we're going to go and do our costs. You just type in the number, hit enter, type in the number, hit enter, and I'll fill these out real quick. Okay, there we go. And now we're going to format these cells a little bit. And for the quantity, we're just going to justify the list over to the other side just to make it a little bit easier to see. The only reason I'm leaving this column wide is because the word quantity is larger, so we don't want to cramp it. We can bring the cost in just a little bit, and then I'm going to highlight this entire row, and I'm going to go up here to the number formatting, and you have all kinds of options here: currency, numbers, dates, times. But we're just going to do currency, and we could either click here, or there's a shortcut right here, and we'll just click on that, and that'll turn it all into currency. And notice how it just automatically drops the dollar sign all over to the left and gives us 2 decimal points. Now you can easily add decimal points or take them away. So I just took one away there, or I can go to 3 decimal points. But generally speaking, with currency, you would just do 2 decimal points. So that's how we do that. Now in the next lecture, we're going to look at this total column, and I'm going to show you how to create 2 formulas. One is a multiplication formula to multiply the quantity times the cost to give you a total, and then the next one is a sum formula to add the entire total to give you a grand total for all of your remodeling expenses at the bottom. So in this lecture, we're going to multiply the quantity times the costs to get our total. So to create that formula, and any formula, you always start with the equal sign. Type that in. And then you can simply click on the cell that you want to multiply. Go Shift and the 8 key, which is also the asterisk. And then click on the next number that you want to multiply by. And then click Enter. And you can see that automatically does the math for us. And if I click on this cell again, it'll show our formula up here. So this cell equals B3 times C3. So we have B3 here and C3 here, and our total is put in that column. Now rather than clicking onto every one of these cells and typing that in one at a time all the way down here, and you can imagine how tedious that would be if you had hundreds or thousands of line items, we can just click on this list here, highlight this, and drag it all the way down and release it. And then if I click on this again, you can see it's copied that formula all the way down this line. So each of these is doing the math correctly, and we've got our totals. Now we're going to go down here and create our grand total. So we're just going to type total here and tab to get to the next cell. And then in here we're going to do the sum formula. And again, you can start by typing the equal sign to create your formula, or you can just go to auto sum, and it's going to select all of the columns above it. And if we don't want all of those columns, like that blank column, we don't want to include that, so we can just go Shift arrow key, and that will raise it up 1. So now we have all of the items that we want to include in this formula, and the formula reads as this: equals sum, which means adding, and then in parentheses D3, which is this cell right here, and the semicolon means through D10. So add D3 through D10 and put the results here. We hit enter, and there's our total. And one thing you've probably noticed as I've been going through the last couple of lectures is that when I put in my quantities and my costs, I put them in incorrectly. So as I look closely at this, I realize that I have cabinet handles. I have 24 for $5, which is correct. I have cabinet units for $200, and then I show 400 countertops for $6 a piece. So obviously that's wrong. I'm only supposed to have one countertop. I'm supposed to have 400 square feet of flooring. So my quantities and costs are off by one number, because I've got this one at the bottom and it should go right here. So what I'm going to show you is how you can cut and insert cells without having to do a whole ton of reconfiguring. So I've highlighted these cells, and I can either right click and go to cut, or I can go Control X, and then I can go up here and highlight where I want to insert them, and then I right click and go to Insert Cut Cells. And what it did was inserted the ones that I cut from the bottom, and it dropped all the other cells down one row accordingly. So you can see now it says one countertop, $500, 400 square feet of flooring for $6 each, one fridge, one oven, 4 gallons of paint, and one sink. So it's accurate now. But you'll notice when you look over here, if you take one sink times $150, it should not equal $500. So my formulas are still off because of the old numbers. So the easy way to fix that is to click on the top here, copy our formula down again, and it's basically just going to refresh the formulas. And you saw them all change, so now we have one fridge for $800, one oven for $500, 4 gallons of paint for $120, and that's a perfect example of the beauty of Excel. If I was doing this all manually, that one little error that I made would have taken a ton of work of copying and pasting and shifting things and redoing all the addition in the totals column here. But with Excel, I was able to just cut, insert, refresh the formulas, and we're good to go. Now in the next lecture, we're just going to finish things up and do some final formatting, and our kitchen remodel cost worksheet will be complete. Okay, so in the last lecture, we added in our totals, and then we created a sum function to give us a grand total at the bottom. Now we're just going to do some final formatting to our spreadsheet to kind of make it look a little sharper and more presentable. So the first thing I want to do is highlight the total row here at the bottom, and we're just going to put a little bit of color in here in the background to make it stand out a little bit more, like that. Then we're going to put some grid lines in here to kind of differentiate our columns and make our headings stand out a little bit more. And one note on grid lines, you'll see all these gray grid lines here. These are just guidelines. These aren't going to show up, for instance, if you were to print this. These are just here within the spreadsheet to make it easier to see where your cells are. So if you want to have grid lines in here that will stand out a lot and will also show up in printing, then you actually need to highlight the cells and go up here to your formatting section here, click on the borders, and go to all borders. Then when I click off of that, you'll see it's put a full border around each of the cells that I highlighted. And now you'll notice too, if I highlight everything and I click on the full borders, you'll notice that it puts a box around every single cell, which is a little much, to be honest. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm just going to highlight each column. And I'm going to put a border around the edge, just outside borders. So it just makes each column of data stand out. So that's just a little cleaner and easier to read. And we're just going to copy that onto these other columns as well. So you'll see that that just defines each column a little bit more and makes it a little bit easier to read. And then I'm going to go highlight these as well and go all borders, and you can see that that just puts a nice box around those. So that's just some simple and clean formatting to kind of spruce up your spreadsheet a little bit and make it look a little nicer. Okay, in this lecture we're going to be talking about printing. And in the modern era we do a lot less printing these days. Everything's kind of gone paperless, a lot of sharing on the cloud. But every once in a while you still need to print something out to share it with someone or print a report. So I'm going to just give you the basics of printing so you know how to do that. So let's say you have a little spreadsheet that you've created and you need to go ahead and print it. The basic way to print is to go up to File and go down here to Print. And it's going to give you a bunch of options here, and it's also going to show you a really nice print preview here, which makes it really easy to see how it's going to turn out. So as you can see, this kind of has our spreadsheet just tucked up into the corner of this 8.5 by 11 sheet. And in the settings here, you can change a lot of the options to make it print however you want. The first option here is to print the active sheets, which is what we have here. We have one sheet active. You can print the entire workbook, which would be all of the worksheets in that workbook. So if I had 3 different worksheets with different spreadsheets on each one, it would print the entire thing. Or you can print just a selected area. You can play with the margins to give more or less white space around your spreadsheet, and then you can scale it to fit the page in different ways. So in this example, where we have a horizontal orientation to our spreadsheet, one option would be to change this from portrait orientation to landscape orientation. And you can see it already fits a little bit better, but then we can go into our scaling and we can go to custom scaling, and it allows us to adjust the size. So we can either type in a number here or we can just click on the scrolling. So let's go to like 170% of normal size and click OK. And now you'll see it's expanded it a lot better to fit into that space. Now you'll also notice that it's still justified over to the left side, so we have extra space on the right here. So what we can do is adjust our margins as well by going to custom margins, and we can make the spacing larger or smaller on the sides by adjusting the left and right margins. You can do the same with the bottom or the top, but what we're going to do is change the centering. So we're going to center this horizontally by clicking that button, and then we're just going to click OK, and you'll see it brings it over nicely into the center. Then when you have everything set up the way you want it to, you can go over to here and you can select your printer. Then once you have the printer that you want, you can select the number of copies that you want and go and click on the print button. Now let's take a look at another example that has additional data, and I'll show you how to arrange that on the page. So you can see in this example we have our spreadsheet, but we also have a pie chart over here. And if we go to our print preview by going to File and Print, or alternately you can click Control P for print, you can see now that in our portrait orientation it's cutting off most of the chart. So to prevent this from getting cut off, we have a couple of options. One option is to change this to landscape orientation, and you can see that's better, but it's still cutting off some of the wording over to the right. So we could then either go to our margins, and right now we're set at normal margins, but we could change it to narrow margins, which just basically makes the spacing around our information smaller. So we'll try that, and you can see that brings it in a little bit, but it's still cutting off the edge just a bit. So now we can go to scaling. We can go to fit sheet on one page, and when we do that you'll see it shrunk it down to fit. So now we have everything on there. Or we could even customize it, so you can see it shrunk it to 92%, but we could try and get it even closer and go say 95% of normal size and click OK. You can see that still fits. Now of course we can also center it if we like. Go to custom scaling options, go to margins and center horizontally, click OK, and that looks a little better, but we still have quite a bit of white space from the actual shape of the pie chart here, and so we can go in and we can adjust the margins, and we can just take the right margin out, and we can increase the left margin, click OK, and that's going to shift it over some more. Maybe we'll even do that a little bit more. And now we're looking more centered. Now another option, if we wanted these two items printed on different pages, is that we can reset our margins to normal, and we'll uncenter our data, and we'll go to no scaling. So we're basically putting everything back, and now we can essentially change the scaling just to make this piece large enough to fit on one page, and then this piece would automatically flow over to another page. And you can do that by going here and doing custom scaling. But there's an easier way too, by going back here to our main screen, and if you go to the View tab up on top, we're in normal view right now. You can go to Page Break View. You can grab any of the edges of your print area and drag them and change them. So you can see this is showing page 1 and this is showing page 2. And if I grab, it's a little bit hard to see underneath the chart here, but if I grab this bar and drag it over to here, I'll move this chart so you can see what it says. See, we have page 1 on the left and we have page 2 on the right. I'll just drop that and go undo so it goes back to where it belongs. So now we have our spreadsheet on page 1 and our chart on page 2. And make sure you click off of the chart, otherwise it'll only print the chart. So we'll go take a look at that in the print preview. So now it shows our table on page 1 and our chart on page 2. And of course, if we want these to fit better, we can just go to our scaling, custom scaling, and increase the size of our image. Click OK. Take a look at both of them, make sure they fit all right. And then we can go in and go to margins and say center horizontally. We could even say center vertically if we want it to show right in the middle of the page. And there you go. So those are some basics on adjusting your page layout and getting your spreadsheets printed.